Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please leave a comment, and subscribe to Voice of Legends. I never thought I would feel like a stranger in my own daughter's life. Growing up, she had been the light of our home, her laughter filling the corners of our house, her tiny hand always seeking mine when she was scared. I was her mother, and my husband, her father. We had watched every scraped knee, every first day of school, every holiday performance. And now, at 26, she had made a choice that left us outside looking in. Her wedding, the one day she should have shared with us, the ones who had loved her unconditionally, was a day we weren't allowed to attend. I can still remember the phone call. It came early in the morning, before I had even had my coffee. My hands were still warm from holding the mug when the words landed like a hammer. "Mom, Dad, we don't want you at the wedding." My husband dropped his newspaper mid-sentence. I think for a moment he didn't breathe. I couldn't either. I remember my stomach twisting so violently that I almost lost my grip on the mug. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to beg her to reconsider, but all that came out of my mouth was a choked "Why?" Her voice was calm, almost clinical, like she was reading from a script written to protect herself. "We just want it to be small, intimate, just our friends." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a curt dismissal of all the years we had poured into her life. My heart ached so deeply I thought it might stop entirely. My husband and I sat in stunned silence, our minds racing through every possibility, every memory that might have led to this. I had to know what was happening. I couldn't just sit at home pretending everything was normal while my daughter celebrated one of the most important days of her life without us. But how could we go? We couldn't call her again without sounding desperate, and we certainly couldn't just show up at the venue. That would make us intruders. And yet the urge to see her, to protect her even from her own choices, was too strong to resist. So, reluctantly, we decided to follow from a distance, to watch silently, unseen. The morning of the wedding, we got into our car long before dawn. The streets were quiet, the air sharp and cold, and I felt a strange combination of dread and anticipation. I clutched my husband's hand as we drove, seeking some kind of reassurance from him, and he squeezed back. Neither of us spoke. Words felt inadequate for the storm of emotions brewing inside us. When we finally arrived near the venue, a small chapel tucked at the edge of town, we parked discreetly behind a row of trees and tried to blend into the shadows. I could see the soft glow of lights through the windows and the faint outlines of guests moving inside. At first, everything seemed perfect. The decorations were delicate, the flowers fresh, and the guests looked happy. But there was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't explain. I could see her, our daughter, moving through the crowd with a poised smile, laughing politely with friends we didn't recognize. Something felt off. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a distance there, a weight behind her careful gestures that made my heart tighten. As the ceremony began, I noticed the groom. He was handsome, polite, but there was an air of unease about him too. He didn't meet our daughter's gaze fully. He looked around the room as if searching for someone or something. My pulse quickened. What had we missed? What had she kept from us all these years? And then it happened. A guest leaned in to whisper something to our daughter. Her expression shifted immediately, her carefully curated smile faltering. She glanced toward a side door, then back at the guests, her hands trembling ever so slightly. I couldn't hear the words, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going according to plan. Moments later, chaos erupted. I saw the groom's face twist in shock and anger. I saw a woman, unknown to me, storming toward him, yelling. Guests turned, whispers spreading like wildfire through the chapel. My daughter froze, frozen in the middle of the aisle, and I felt a sharp pang of fear for her. Something I'd long suspected but never confirmed was now becoming painfully clear. Our daughter's perfect day was unraveling before my eyes, and there was nothing we could do from the shadows but watch. And then, the most shocking part, my husband whispered, almost to himself, "Mary, look at who's behind her." I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Standing in the back, her presence commanding, was my daughter's older cousin, someone we had trusted, someone we thought had always had her best interests at heart. But now I could see the betrayal edged clearly on her face. She wasn't here to celebrate, she was here to expose. As the events spiraled further, whispers became accusations, polite laughter turned to arguments, and the carefully constructed ceremony collapsed under the weight of long-hidden family secrets. I wanted to step in, to run through the doors and pull my daughter away from the humiliation, but I knew I couldn't. She had to see this for herself. And as much as it hurt to watch, as much as it tore at my heart to see her surrounded by people who suddenly seemed like strangers, there was a grim sense of vindication building inside me. Our daughter had tried to exclude us, thinking perhaps we would not understand her choices, or worse, that we would disapprove. But as I watched the truth emerge, every lie unraveling, every betrayal coming to light, I realized that she had learned a lesson in a way we never could have taught her. She had been shielded in her mind from consequences. And now, in this chaotic, heartbreaking, yet oddly liberating moment, she was facing the raw reality of trust, honesty, and the importance of family. I can still feel that icy chill as I clutched my husband's hand. We didn't intervene. We didn't shout. We simply watched, silent witnesses to the collapse of a day that had been meant to celebrate love. And through the fear, anger, and heartbreak, there was an undeniable sense of closure forming. Our daughter might have tried to shut us out, but life has a way of teaching lessons no one can avoid. I remember thinking for the first time in hours that maybe this was her way of understanding what really matters. That perhaps she would see, amid the chaos, that the bonds of family built through years of love and patience are not something you can erase, no matter how hard you try. And so, as the day faded into confusion, tears, and revelations, I sat quietly in that car, holding my husband's hand, feeling a strange mix of grief, relief, and hope. We had been excluded, yes, but we had also witnessed a truth that would shape our daughter's life forever. And I knew deep down that when the dust settled, our family would emerge stronger, though changed, forever changed. We stayed in the car for a long while after the ceremony collapsed. The noise from inside the chapel had faded into distant murmurs, and the cold evening air seemed almost to hold its breath. My husband and I didn't speak much. There was nothing to say that could make sense of what we had just witnessed, but I could feel the pulse on my own heart, a chaotic rhythm of worry, anger, and something like relief. Relief that perhaps our daughter would finally see that you cannot hide from the consequences of deception. Eventually, curiosity overcame hesitation. We decided to move closer to the entrance, careful to remain unseen, hoping to get a better sense of what had truly unfolded. From the shadows, we could see the aftermath. Guests huddled in small, uneasy groups, whispering among themselves, and our daughter standing frozen near the altar, her hands clutched tightly in front of her, eyes glistening. She wasn't crying openly, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the quiver of her lips. She was stunned, completely overwhelmed, and my heart ached at the sight. And then I saw him, the groom. He was standing just a few feet from her, looking as though someone had punched him squarely in the gut. His face was red, his brow furrowed, and he was struggling to maintain some semblance of composure in front of the stunned guests. And then, slowly, the truth hit me like a hammer. This wasn't just a fight between the bride and her cousin or a guest showing up uninvited. There had been plans, manipulations, things our daughter had no idea about, and the groom had been at the center of it all. I watched as the cousin, our cousin, someone we had always trusted, cornered him, pointing an accusatory finger, voice rising. The words were muffled, but the anger and betrayal in her tone were unmistakable. I could see the shock ripple through our daughter. Her hand went to her mouth as though trying to hold back the realization, the embarrassment, the horror. For a moment, she looked as small as the little girl she had once been, standing in the middle of a storm she had not anticipated. My husband whispered beside me, "I think she's finally seeing who he really is." I nodded, my throat tight, unable to say anything else. Watching your child face heartbreak is something that strikes deeper than any personal loss you could ever imagine. But there was also clarity forming in my mind. I remembered all the little signs we had dismissed, the fleeting doubts, the quiet unease our daughter had never spoken of. It all made sense now. We had been worried because we loved her, but she hadn't been ready to hear the warnings. Perhaps this public exposure was what she needed. The chaos inside the chapel didn't subside quickly. Guests were whispering to one another, some clearly trying to decide whether they should intervene or simply leave. Our daughter's carefully planned wedding, meant to be perfect and intimate, had crumbled around her. And yet, from the shadows, I saw a strange resilience in her posture, even as tears slid down her cheeks. She was absorbing the consequences, processing the betrayal, and slowly she began to stand taller, as if reclaiming some part of herself that had been naive and untested until this moment. I remember feeling my own tears welling up, not just from sorrow, but from a sense of vindication. We had been excluded, yes, but not because we were unwanted in her life. She had chosen to shield herself from difficult truths, to create a world where she could feel in control. Life had a way of correcting that, harshly and beautifully, and we were here to witness it, not to interfere, not to protect, but simply to bear witness to the lessons she needed to learn. At one point, the groom's anger reached a boiling point. I could see him pointing fingers, his voice sharp and accusatory, as though trying to shift blame onto someone else. But the cousin was relentless. She knew the truth, and she wasn't going to let him evade it. Guests were now clearly divided, some whispering behind fans of hands, others stepping closer, curious and tense. And then, as if on cue, our daughter spoke. Her voice was trembling but firm, cutting through the chaos like a fragile yet powerful blade. "Stop. Just stop." It was the first moment she truly took control, not as the daughter we had raised in safety and comfort, but as a woman who was forced to face deception head-on. She accused, she admitted, she acknowledged things she had ignored or been shielded from. Each word carried weight, and I could see the expressions of shock and disbelief on the faces around her. Guests who had come to celebrate were now caught in the whirlwind of truth, forced to confront the reality of long-hidden lies. My husband and I shared a glance. I think we both realized the same thing. Our daughter had grown in ways that no warning or advice could have prompted. She had learned about trust, deceit, and the value of honesty the hard way. And as painful as it was to witness, it was also transformative. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the room began to quiet. The cousins stormed out, leaving behind a mix of muttered apologies, resentful glances, and whispered speculations. The groom, humiliated and red-faced, lingered near the altar, unable to meet our daughter's gaze, and she, exhausted, finally let herself collapse into the nearest chair, head in her hands, trembling. I wanted to rush to her, to hold her and say everything would be okay, but something stopped me. She needed to feel the weight of this moment, to process it in full, without interference. And yet, from my hiding spot, I could see the change forming in her eyes. That stubborn, proud little girl who had excluded us, thinking she could manage everything alone, was starting to understand something profound. She was seeing that life isn't about avoiding discomfort, avoiding confrontation, or excluding those who love you. It's about facing reality, owning mistakes, and finding the strength to continue despite the chaos. I squeezed my husband's hand again, silently promising him that we would be there for her when she was ready, that we had witnessed the truth, and it would serve as a foundation for a stronger, more honest relationship. There was grief in the moment, yes, but also relief and an unexpected sense of justice. Life had a way of correcting itself, even if it didn't follow the path we imagined. And sometimes the lessons learned in heartbreak are the ones that last forever. As the last guests drifted away, the chapel doors swinging shut behind them, I felt a quiet calm settle over the scene. Our daughter remained inside, still processing, but she was no longer alone in her emotions. The storm had passed, leaving behind a mixture of pain, clarity, and resilience. And I knew as I sat there in the car with my husband that the journey to reconciliation was only beginning, but it would be built on honesty, experience, and the unshakable bonds of family. By the time we finally drove away, night had fully fallen. The street lights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot, and the cool air felt cleansing, like the world had been reset. I looked at my husband and saw the same mixture of pride, grief, and cautious hope reflected in his eyes. We hadn't been part of the celebration, but we had been part of something perhaps even more meaningful: the unveiling of truth, the confrontation of betrayal, and the first steps towards our daughter truly understanding the value of family and honesty. That night, I realized that love isn't always about being included in every moment, no matter how painful it feels. Sometimes, love is about watching from a distance, letting life teach its lessons, and being ready to embrace those you love when they finally emerge stronger, wiser, and more aware of the fragile beauty of trust. And as we drove home, the silence between my husband and I wasn't heavy or sorrowful. It was reflective, full of unspoken gratitude for the fact that even in heartbreak, there is growth, and even in exclusion, there is perspective. The days after the wedding were the hardest. Our daughter didn't call, didn't reach out, and we didn't push. It was strange, this silence, a void that stretched between us, filled with the memory of the chaos we had witnessed. I found myself replaying every detail in my mind, her hands trembling at the altar, the cousin's furious accusations, the groom's stunned expression, and yet I couldn't bring myself to feel only anger. There was relief, yes, but also sorrow, and a gnawing fear that our daughter might carry this embarrassment and heartbreak for far longer than we could imagine. We tried to continue with our lives, though it felt hollow. Every meal we shared, every quiet evening in our living room, reminded me that a piece of our family had been fractured, temporarily at least. My husband busied himself with work, pretending to read reports at the kitchen table, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the subtle way he clenched his jaw whenever I mentioned our daughter. We weren't used to being excluded from anything in her life. For decades, we had been her world, and now we were watching from a distance while she navigated a world we didn't fully understand. On the third day after the wedding, I decided I needed to do something, not to confront her, not to demand explanations, but simply to reach out in a way that reminded her we were still here. I picked up the phone, dialing her number, my fingers trembling more than I expected. The line rang, and for a moment, I considered hanging up. What if she was still angry? What if my attempt to connect reopened wounds we weren't ready to heal yet? But then the familiar click as she picked up, the sound that had once made my heart leap, brought a rush of memories. Her first steps, her first day at school, the night I stayed up waiting for her to come home from her first sleepover. "Mom?" Her voice was quiet, cautious, and it stabbed me with a pang of guilt I hadn't anticipated. "Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to check in, make sure you're okay." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause, and then, almost like a floodgate opening, she spoke. Not in the polished, controlled tone I had heard on the wedding day, but raw, honest, vulnerable. Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say. Everything went wrong. I never thought it would turn out like that. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. I know, honey. I saw it. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I want you to know we're here, always. She hesitated again, then whispered, I was so scared you wouldn't understand. Oh, darling, I said, my voice trembling slightly, we understand more than you know. Sometimes life teaches the lessons we can't give, and I think this has been one of them. There was another pause, filled with unspoken emotion, and then a small, fragile sound, a sob. I wanted to be there to hold her, to soothe the fear and shame, but we were still apart. I sat in the living room, clutching the phone, feeling every ounce of her pain as if it were my own. And I realized that for the first time since the wedding, a bridge had begun to form. One word, one confession, one fragile admission of fear had begun to mend what had been broken. Over the next few days, she called more frequently. Each conversation was cautious at first, polite, testing the waters of reconnection. But gradually, it became easier. She shared fragments of her thoughts about the wedding, her fear of confrontation, the groom's shocking betrayal, the cousin's unexpected appearance, and the whirlwind of emotions she had felt. I listened, quietly, patiently, letting her pour out everything without judgment. My husband would sometimes sit beside me in silence, nodding quietly, both of us absorbing the weight of her story while letting her feel the full gravity of her own experiences. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. She began to open up about other things we had suspected but never confirmed. The subtle ways her fiancé had tried to manipulate situations, the pressure from friends to maintain appearances, and her own fear of disappointing us. For so long, she had carried these burdens alone, thinking she needed to shield us from her mistakes and heartbreak. I realized then how heavy that kind of responsibility could be for someone so young, how it could twist decisions and make even the people we love most feel distant. One evening, she finally asked what I had been dreading. Mom, Dad, did you see what happened? Yes, honey, I admitted, every moment. And I want you to know we're proud of how you've handled yourself. You faced the truth, you learned, and that's what matters. Not the perfect day, not the smiles in the photos, but the courage to face reality. There was silence on the other end, and then a choked laugh. I never thought you'd hear that from you without it sounding lecturing. I smiled through my tears. Life teaches lessons differently, sometimes harshly, sometimes gently, but always, always with the hope that we grow stronger. The next week, our daughter came over. We hadn't planned it. She just showed up at our door one evening, a small suitcase in hand, her eyes tired but determined. I opened the door and hugged her without a word, letting the weight of the past few days settle between us. My husband joined, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we were all in the same room without tension, without barriers, just the quiet relief of presence. She explained everything then, every small deception, every betrayal she had uncovered, every emotion she had tried to bury. And as she spoke, I realized that what seemed like rejection was actually a journey that forced her to confront reality, to distinguish between those who truly cared for her and those who had hidden agendas. It was painful, yes, but it was also transformative. And in that moment, I knew our family, though scarred, would be stronger for it. Later that evening, as we sat together, sipping tea and letting the silence wrap around us like a warm blanket, I reflected on the events that had unfolded. I thought about how easy it would have been to resent our daughter for excluding us, to feel anger at the world for letting her face such public humiliation. But instead, I felt gratitude for the chance to witness her growth, to see her learn the value of honesty, and to be ready, when she finally sought us, to welcome her with open arms. Because that's what family is. Not perfection, not flawless events or unbroken smiles. It's presence. It's patience. It's the willingness to endure heartbreak and confusion, to bear witness to mistakes, and to offer unconditional love when the dust settles. And as our daughter finally leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder, I knew that despite everything, we were exactly where we were meant to be, together, a family weathered but unbroken. And in that quiet evening, I realized something else. Sometimes being excluded isn't the end of love. Sometimes it's the beginning of understanding. Sometimes it's the harsh, painful, messy way life forces us to see what really matters. And for our daughter, for us, for the family we had built over decades, that lesson, though learned in chaos, was one we would carry forever. After that evening, our home felt different, quiet in a way that wasn't empty, but filled with reflection. Our daughter stayed longer than expected, unpacking her emotions as she unpacked her suitcase. She hadn't come with demands or expectations. She came seeking connection, seeking understanding, and we gave it to her, not with lectures or judgments, but with patience and presence. That, I realized, was the true gift we could offer. Not advice, not criticism, but a safe place to exist, flaws and all. Over the next few days, our conversations became more honest, more raw. She admitted mistakes she had made, not just with the wedding, but with how she handled relationships and decisions over the years. It was hard to hear, and yet I couldn't bring myself to be angry because she spoke with a humility I hadn't seen before, a willingness to own her choices and face consequences. I remembered a phrase my mother used to tell me: the hardest growth is the growth you choose to feel. And I could see that she was feeling it now, fully, for the first time. One afternoon, we decided to go through the wedding photos she had salvaged. Most were ruined, blurry from the chaos, faces frozen in shock or embarrassment, but some captured moments of raw honesty. The confusion, the whispered arguments, the stunned expressions. I realized that even in imperfection there was beauty. Even in failure there was a lesson. And as we sat together, pointing out small moments of human vulnerability, I saw our daughter laugh genuinely for the first time in weeks, unburdened by appearances, unafraid of imperfection. It was during one of these moments that she began to share things she had never told us before. Secrets, fears, and disappointments that had weighed on her for years. She spoke of how she had hidden insecurities from friends, how she had worried constantly about living up to our expectations, how she had struggled to trust even those closest to her. As she poured out her heart, I felt a mix of heartbreak and admiration. Heartbreak because she had carried so much alone, admiration because she was finally allowing herself to be vulnerable, finally letting us in. My husband, quiet as ever, listened with a steady presence, occasionally offering a gentle word of reassurance. I realized that our daughter had not only learned about betrayal and disappointment, but about resilience. She had faced the collapse of what she thought was her perfect day, and she had survived. More than that, she had begun to understand the meaning of trust, and that the people who truly love her, her family, would stand by her, even when she faltered. It was on the third day of her visit that she asked the question I had been silently hoping for. "Mom, Dad, do you really forgive me for keeping you out of the wedding?" I took a deep breath, thinking of the nights I had spent worrying, replaying every moment of that chaotic day and all the emotions that had followed. "Honey, there's nothing to forgive," I said, my voice calm but firm, You made a choice and life taught you a lesson. We only want you to grow from it, to learn, and to remember that we will always be here." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was relief mixed with them. "I was so scared I had lost you," she whispered. "You could never lose us," I replied, pulling her into a hug. "You might have pushed us away, but love doesn't work like that. It waits patiently until you're ready to come back." Over the next few weeks, our family began to rebuild. She reconnected with friends, clarified the misunderstandings with the groom's side, and began planning a more private celebration, a symbolic act, not just of marriage, but of reconciliation and honesty. My husband and I helped her, quietly, without stepping in to control anything, letting her lead the way while offering guidance only when she asked. It was a delicate balance, but it felt right. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, she shared something that struck me deeply. "I think I understand now why you always tried to protect me," she said, her voice soft. "Not because you wanted to control me, but because you loved me. And sometimes love means letting someone stumble, even if it hurts to watch." I nodded, my eyes misting. "Exactly, sweetheart. Sometimes the lessons that hurt the most are the ones that teach us the most." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The wedding had been more than an event. It had been a turning point, a catalyst for growth, honesty, and understanding. The chaos, the betrayal, the humiliation, all of it had shaped her into someone stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of navigating life's complexities. And as a parent, watching that transformation unfold, even from the shadows at first, was a strange mix of pain and pride. Weeks turned into months, and slowly life returned to a new kind of normal. The scars of the wedding day remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of resilience, lessons learned, and the enduring strength of family bonds. Our daughter became more communicative, more open about her fears and insecurities, and more appreciative of the quiet presence my husband and I had maintained throughout the ordeal. It wasn't always easy. Trust, once shaken, takes time to rebuild. But every small conversation, every shared laugh, every tear we shed together brought us closer. We celebrated milestones in her life with a deeper understanding of each other, knowing that the past had tested us, but had also taught us to value honesty, empathy, and presence above all else. And as I reflect on that tumultuous period now, I understand something I couldn't see at the time. Life doesn't always unfold the way we plan. Weddings collapse, plans fail, people disappoint. But through it all, the bonds that matter most endure. Our family endured, not because the day went perfectly, but because love, patience, and understanding held strong. Sometimes being excluded isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity to witness, to learn, to grow, and to realize what truly matters. Our daughter learned it the hard way, but she learned it. And as her parents, we were privileged to witness her growth, to support her quietly, and to embrace her fully when she finally returned to us, wiser and stronger than before. Even after our daughter returned, the echoes of that disastrous wedding lingered in the air. It wasn't just about the chaos of that day, it was the ripple effect it had on all our relationships. Friends who had witnessed the fallout had opinions, whispers followed us in subtle ways, and even within our family, old grievances began to surface. It was as though one storm had awakened others, and we had to navigate them carefully without losing the fragile connection we had just rebuilt with our daughter. One morning, as I was making coffee, my husband approached me with a worried expression. "Mary, I think your sister's taking sides," he said quietly. He gestured toward the phone, which had been buzzing sporadically with messages from my older sister, who had her own judgmental take on the wedding fiasco. I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly, knowing this was going to be another delicate situation. I remembered how, for years, our daughter had tried to manage the expectations of extended family, of friends, even of strangers, and how exhausting that must have been. She had internalized everyone else's opinions while keeping our guidance at arm's length. And now, even after facing the consequences of exclusion and betrayal, the world continued to press in. I knew our role as parents wasn't to fight every battle for her, but to equip her with the understanding to navigate them herself. Later that afternoon, our daughter called. Her voice was shaky, anxious but tinged with determination. "Mom, Dad, I need advice," she said. "My sister is, I don't know, saying things that make me feel like I'm wrong for everything that happened at the wedding. What should I do?" I paused for a moment, carefully choosing my words. "Honey, you can't control what anyone else thinks or says. You can only control how you respond. Stand firm in what you know is true, be honest, and protect your own heart. And remember, we are always on your side." She exhaled slowly, relief evident in her tone. "Thank you. I really needed that." We hung up, and I felt a wave of pride. She was beginning to navigate not just the fallout of the wedding, but the complicated web of opinions, judgments, and expectations that had always surrounded her. She was learning to assert herself, to trust her instincts, and to understand that family support doesn't mean dictating her every choice. The following week, we invited her to a quiet dinner at our house. My husband had cooked, something he rarely did, and I had prepared her favorite dessert. There was no fanfare, no ceremony, just the four of us sitting together, sharing food, laughter, and the slow rebuilding of trust. And in that ordinary evening, I saw something extraordinary. She laughed without caution, shared stories without fear of judgment, and even apologized for the distance she had created between us. "I shouldn't have excluded you from the wedding," she admitted softly. "I was scared. I didn't think I could face everything, and I thought it would be easier if you weren't there." I reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Sweetheart, I understand. Fear makes us do things we don't fully comprehend. What matters is that you've come back, that you've faced the consequences, and that you're willing to grow from it." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment the weight of everything, the wedding chaos, the betrayal, the silence, the heartbreak, lifted slightly. We didn't dwell on blame or regret. We simply existed in the quiet shared understanding that love and family endure, even when choices hurt. In the days that followed, our daughter began to reach out more. She met with friends who had witnessed the wedding disaster, apologizing where necessary, explaining her side, and gradually restoring trust. She even started to confront the groom about the betrayal she had uncovered, standing firm in her boundaries and refusing to allow anyone to manipulate or control her. I watched this transformation quietly, sometimes with tears in my eyes, sometimes with awe at the resilience and strength she had discovered within herself. It was during one of these reflective evenings that I realized something I hadn't before. The wedding had been a turning point, not just for her, but for all of us. It forced honesty, confrontation, and emotional growth in ways that none of us could have anticipated. We were forced to witness the raw truth of human behavior, the betrayals, the lies, the misunderstandings, but also the courage, the strength, and the resilience that comes from facing reality head on. My husband and I would often sit quietly together after these long conversations, reflecting on the lessons our daughter had learned and the ways in which our own love and patience had been tested. We realized that parenting isn't about preventing every mistake or shielding children from every consequence. Sometimes it's about letting them stumble, watching them fall, and being ready to guide them back without judgment, without anger, simply with unwavering presence. One night, our daughter came to me with a question that surprised me. "Mom, do you think I'll ever have a perfect day?" I laughed softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. Perfect days are rare. Life doesn't hand them to us, but there are moments of perfection in honesty, in courage, in love. And if you carry those with you, every day can hold pieces of perfection. She smiled faintly, a mixture of hope and lingering doubt. I hope I can remember that next time I make a choice. You will, I said firmly, and you'll remember that family isn't about attending every event or having flawless moments. It's about presence, patience, and love through chaos, mistakes, and triumphs alike. In the weeks that followed, our daughter's confidence grew. She became more assertive in her decisions, more transparent in her communication, and more appreciative of the quiet support my husband and I offered. The wedding that had once felt like a tragedy became a story of transformation, of lessons learned the hard way, and of the enduring strength of family bonds. And yet, even as we celebrated these small victories, I couldn't ignore the lingering impact of exclusion. It left scars, emotional marks that would take time to heal. But we faced them together, acknowledging the hurt, understanding the reasons, and moving forward with intentionality. I realized then that forgiveness isn't a single act, it's a process, and watching our daughter navigate that process, witnessing her courage and growth, was one of the most profound experiences of my life. Life slowly began to return to a more comfortable rhythm. There was still moments of tension, occasional disagreements, and reminders of the wedding chaos, but they no longer held the power to divide us. Instead, they became reference points, stories we could reflect on, lessons we could carry forward, reminders that even the most painful experiences can foster growth and understanding. One evening, as we all sat together watching old family videos, our daughter leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." I held her close, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the silence, the chaos, and smiled softly. "Honey, we would never give up on you. That's what family does. No matter what mistakes are made, no matter how far you try to push us, we will always be here." And in that moment, I understood fully the moral lesson that had been woven through every chaotic, emotional, and heart-wrenching event. Life will test us, relationships will be strained, and people we love may make choices that hurt us. After the initial chaos of the wedding and the slow healing that followed, life settled into a new rhythm for our little family. But even as the days grew calmer, I couldn't ignore the lingering tension beneath the surface. There were subtle reminders everywhere: the cousin's bitterness, the groom's resentment, and even the faint whisper of judgment from friends who had attended the wedding. Our daughter had weathered the storm, yes, but life had a way of testing resilience long after the initial disaster had passed. One afternoon, my husband and I sat together on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sun dip behind the trees. I could feel the weight of reflection pressing down on me. "Mary," my husband said, his voice quiet, "do you think she's really learned everything from this?" I paused, considering. "I think she's learning, James," I replied slowly. "But lessons don't arrive all at once. They come in pieces, sometimes painful pieces, and we're here to help her put them together." It wasn't long before the next test arrived. Our daughter came to us one morning looking pale and anxious, clutching a letter she had received from her soon-to-be mother-in-law. I could see her hands trembling as she handed it to me. The words on the page weren't just critical, they were accusatory, full of judgment and subtle threats about family reputation. I could feel her fear radiating off of her, and I knew instantly that this was another crossroads. "Mom, Dad, I don't know what to do," she whispered. "She's trying to make me feel like everything was my fault." I put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Sweetheart, you faced worse. Remember the wedding chaos? The betrayal, the lies, the exposure. You survived all of that. This is just words on a page. You can respond calmly, firmly, and truthfully without letting it shake you. She nodded, swallowing hard. I just don't want to make things worse. You won't, I assured her. Just speak from the truth. Protect yourself and your boundaries, and don't let fear dictate your actions. Over the next few days, she carefully drafted a response, leaning on us for guidance only when she needed perspective. I was struck by the transformation in her demeanor. Once timid and fearful of confrontation, now she approached the situation with quiet confidence, measuring her words, standing firm without aggression. It was a far cry from the frantic, overwhelmed young woman who had hidden behind polite smiles during her wedding day chaos. It was during this time that I began to notice subtle shifts in our own relationship as well. The distance created by the wedding and its fallout had ironically allowed space for deeper connection. We were no longer hovering, no longer assuming we had to control or protect every step of her life. Instead, we had learned to listen, to reflect, and to offer guidance without judgment. It was a delicate balance, but it strengthened our bond in ways I hadn't anticipated. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, our daughter lingered in the kitchen, watching us with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, Dad, I think I finally understand why you always stayed so calm even when I pushed you away," she said softly. "It wasn't just patience, it was faith. Faith in me that I would find my way even if I made mistakes along the way." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "Yes, honey," I said gently, "faith in you and faith in the bond we share. We may stumble and life may test us, but love and family endure." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I think I'm ready to move forward now, not just with the wedding, but with everything. I don't want fear or mistakes to define me anymore." It was the first time in months that I felt a true sense of closure on the wedding chaos. Not because the events themselves had been resolved, they hadn't, but because our daughter had internalized the lessons, embraced her growth, and was taking responsibility for her own life. That, more than any apology or reconciliation, was the true victory. But life wasn't done testing us. A few weeks later, we received a phone call from a mutual family friend, someone who had witnessed the wedding fallout firsthand. Their voice was urgent, almost conspiratorial. "You need to know. There's more going on. The groom, he's not who you think he is. He's involved in things that could affect your daughter." I felt my stomach drop. After everything we had endured, after all the emotional healing and quiet reflection, here was another storm on the horizon. My husband's face tightened, worry etched into every line. "What kind of things?" he asked, his voice steady but tense. "I can't say much over the phone," the friend said, "but it's serious. Your daughter needs to be careful. Trust no one blindly." The call ended, leaving us in stunned silence. I looked at my husband, searching for words, but he shook his head slightly. "We have to tell her. She deserves to know." And so we did. Sitting together in the living room that evening, I took a deep breath and explained what we had learned. Our daughter's eyes widened, a mixture of fear, shock, and disbelief flashed across her face. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "After everything, I held her hand tightly. "I know, honey, I know. But you've survived chaos before. You faced betrayal, exposure, and public embarrassment. You can handle this too. We'll help you navigate it step by step." It was a heavy moment, filled with tension and uncertainty, but also a profound sense of solidarity. She wasn't alone. She had learned to face adversity, and this was another opportunity for her to do so with courage and clarity. In the following days, we worked together to uncover the full extent of the groom's actions, carefully piecing together facts, verifying information, and preparing her to confront the truth. I watched her grow more confident with each step, her fear gradually giving way to determination. She was no longer the hesitant, overwhelmed young woman from the wedding day. She was resilient, aware, and fiercely protective of her own future. One afternoon, as we were sitting reviewing documents and messages, she looked up at me, eyes filled with gratitude. "Mom, Dad, I couldn't have done this without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of pride, relief, and love so deep it was almost tangible. "We always believed, honey. That's what family does. We may not control everything, but we walk with you through every storm." And as I watched her absorb that, I realized something vital. The wedding, the betrayal, the chaos, it had all been preparation, not just for the challenges she would face in relationships and life, but for understanding the depth of resilience, the power of truth, and the enduring strength of family. Life would continue to test her, to challenge her, to push her to the brink, but she would face it now armed with courage, insight, and the knowledge that no matter what happened, she would always have a safe harbor in the hearts of her parents. And in that understanding, I found a peace that had been elusive for months. The knowledge that love, when steady and patient, can transform even the most chaotic, heart-wrenching experiences into lessons that endure. Even as we moved past the immediate chaos of the wedding and uncovered the groom's dissections, the tension in our daughter's life wasn't fully gone. There were lingering doubts, residual embarrassment, and the subtle but constant pressure of judgment from people who had witnessed the fallout. It seemed as though everyone had an opinion about her, about us, and about the wedding disaster. But one thing was clear. Our daughter had changed. She was no longer naive, no longer hesitant to face hard truth, and no longer willing to let others manipulate her. One rainy afternoon she came to us, soaked from the storm outside, and sat heavily on the sofa. "Mom, Dad, I feel like I've been living inside a storm for months," she admitted, her voice soft but trembling. "Even after the wedding, after everything with him, I can't seem to find calm." I put a hand on hers, feeling the tension in her fingers. "Honey, storms leave a mark, yes, but they also teach us something. You faced betrayal, chaos, and fear, and you survived it. Calm doesn't come immediately, but it comes when we take ownership of our experiences and learn from them." Her gaze drifted to the window, where rain fell steadily, as if mirroring the heaviness she carried inside. "It's just, I feel like everyone is watching me now, judging every choice, every word." My husband joined us, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, you can't control what people think. You can only control your actions and your integrity. The rest, the whispers, the judgments, they fade over time. What remains is what you do with your own heart." She nodded, a mix of understanding and lingering anxiety in her expression. "I want to move forward, I really do, but it's hard to feel like I'm starting from scratch after all of this." "That's exactly what growth feels like," I said gently. "Starting over isn't a failure. It's an opportunity to rebuild with knowledge, awareness, and strength. You've been given a second chance, not because life is fair, but because you now have the tools to handle it wisely." In the weeks that followed, we worked together on rebuilding her life piece by piece. She began setting boundaries with friends, clarifying miscommunications, and making deliberate choices about who she trusted. She reconnected with family members who had been silent during the wedding chaos, explaining her side of the story with honesty and humility. And through it all, my husband and I remained quiet observers and gentle guides, letting her navigate while offering support whenever she faltered. One evening, she confided in me about her fears regarding the future. "Mom, what if I make another mistake? What if someone else deceives me like he did?" I held her hands tightly, looking into her eyes. Honey, mistakes will happen. Betrayal may happen again, but you are stronger now. You have experienced the consequences of choices, the chaos of hidden truth, and the clarity that comes from facing reality. No one can take that from you. You've learned how to see people clearly and protect yourself without shutting your heart down. She exhaled, leaning against me for comfort. It just feels like I've carried this weight for so long. I don't want it to define me. You won't let it define you, I said firmly. It's part of your story, yes, but not the whole story. You get to write the next chapters yourself, with knowledge, strength, and honesty guiding you. As time passed, our daughter's confidence grew. She started engaging with her life in ways that felt intentional, deliberate, and empowered. She began advocating for herself, not in anger, but in calm, assertive clarity. She reconnected with friends on her terms, pursued personal goals, and even started planning a private, intimate gathering to celebrate her marriage in a way that reflected honesty, integrity, and personal choice, far removed from the chaos of the original wedding. During this time, I noticed another subtle shift in her demeanor: gratitude. She expressed appreciation for the patience, guidance, and unconditional support my husband and I had offered, acknowledging that even when she excluded us, we never stopped being present. That acknowledgement, simple as it was, filled me with profound emotion. I realized then that resilience isn't just built from experiences alone. It's also nurtured by the unwavering presence of those who care, even when they are pushed away. One afternoon, she turned to us with a quiet resolve. "Mom, Dad, I want you to know that I've learned more from this mess than I could have imagined, not just about the people around me, but about myself, about what I value, who I trust, and how I move forward. And I want to thank you for never giving up, for letting me face the consequences, but being ready to catch me if I fell." I felt tears welling in my eyes. "Honey, you did the hard part. You faced it. We just made sure you weren't alone while doing it." Her eyes glistened as she nodded. "I think I finally understand what family really is." Even as we moved past the immediate chaos of the wedding and uncovered the groom's dissections, the tension in our daughter's life wasn't fully gone. There were lingering doubts, residual embarrassment, and the subtle but constant pressure of judgment from people who had witnessed the fallout. It seemed as though everyone had an opinion about her, about us, and about the wedding disaster. But one thing was clear: our daughter had changed. She was no longer naive, no longer hesitant to face hard truth, and no longer willing to let others manipulate her. One rainy afternoon, she came to us, soaked from the storm outside, and sat heavily on the sofa. "Mom, Dad, I feel like I've been living inside a storm for months," she admitted, her voice soft but trembling. "Even after the wedding, after everything with him, I can't seem to find calm." I put a hand on hers, feeling the tension in her fingers. "Honey, storms leave a mark, yes, but they also teach us something. You faced betrayal, chaos, and fear, and you survived it. Calm doesn't come immediately, but it comes when we take ownership of our experiences and learn from them." Her gaze drifted to the window, where rain fell steadily, as if mirroring the heaviness she carried inside. "It's just, I feel like everyone is watching me now, judging every choice, every word." My husband joined us, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, you can't control what people think. You can only control your actions and your integrity. The rest, the whispers, the judgments, they fade over time. What remains is what you do with your own heart." She nodded, a mix of understanding and lingering anxiety in her expression. "I want to move forward, I really do, but it's hard to feel like I'm starting from scratch after all of this." "That's exactly what growth feels like," I said gently. Starting over isn't a failure. It's an opportunity to rebuild with knowledge, awareness, and strength. You've been given a second chance, not because life is fair, but because you now have the tools to handle it wisely. In the weeks that followed, we worked together on rebuilding her life piece by piece. She began setting boundaries with friends, clarifying miscommunications, and making deliberate choices about who she trusted. She reconnected with family members who had been silent during the wedding chaos, explaining her side of the story with honesty and humility. And through it all, my husband and I remained quiet observers and gentle guides, letting her navigate while offering support whenever she faltered. One evening, she confided in me about her fears regarding the future. "Mom, what if I make another mistake? What if someone else deceives me like he did?" I held her hands tightly, looking into her eyes. "Honey, mistakes will happen. Betrayal may happen again, but you are stronger now. You have experienced the consequences of choices, the chaos of hidden truth, and the clarity that comes from facing reality. No one can take that from you. You've learned how to see people clearly and protect yourself without shutting your heart down." She exhaled, leaning against me for comfort. "It just feels like I've carried this weight for so long. I don't want it to define me." "You won't let it define you," I said firmly. "It's part of your story, yes, but not the whole story. You get to write the next chapters yourself, with knowledge, strength, and honesty guiding you." As time passed, our daughter's confidence grew. She started engaging with her life in ways that felt intentional, deliberate, and empowered. She began advocating for herself, not in anger, but in calm, assertive clarity. She reconnected with friends on her terms, pursued personal goals, and even started planning a private, intimate gathering to celebrate her marriage in a way that reflected honesty, integrity, and personal choice, far removed from the chaos of the original wedding. During this time, I noticed another subtle shift in her demeanor: gratitude. She expressed appreciation for the patience, guidance, and unconditional support my husband and I had offered, acknowledging that even when she excluded us, we never stopped being. The weeks that followed our daughter's private celebration brought a quiet sense of normalcy, but life continued to test the lessons she had learned. She began to rebuild relationships with friends and family who had distanced themselves during the wedding chaos. Some were hesitant, cautious, and judgmental, while others approached with genuine curiosity, hoping to understand the truth for themselves. It was delicate territory, and I watched her navigate it with a newfound confidence, a balance of humility and assertiveness that had been missing before. One evening, she came to me, holding an envelope in her hands, her face drawn and anxious. "Mom, it's from him," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The groom, he's trying to contact me again." I motioned for her to sit beside me, taking her hands in mine. "Honey, what does he want?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But he's asking to meet, to talk things over. I don't feel safe, and I don't know if I should respond." I nodded, understanding immediately. You don't have to respond unless you feel safe and ready, and if you do decide to meet, do it with boundaries. Take someone with you, be clear about what you will and won't accept, and remember, you're in control of this situation, not him. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you. I needed to hear that. I don't want to make another mistake." "You won't," I reassured her. "You've already learned so much. You know how to protect yourself, how to trust your instincts, and how to confront deception when it appears. That knowledge is more valuable than anything else." Over the next few days, she considered her options carefully. She didn't rush into a decision, which in itself was a reflection of her growth. For years, she had acted impulsively, fearful of confrontation or consequences. Now she weighed her choices thoughtfully, consulting with us when necessary, but ultimately trusting her own judgment, and that was a victory in itself. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the living room, I noticed her sitting quietly at the kitchen table, writing in her journal. She looked up briefly, smiled faintly, and said, "Mom, I think I finally understand what you meant about owning my choices, not just when things go wrong, but always. That even when people betray me or life throws chaos, it's still my responsibility to respond thoughtfully." I felt a lump in my throat. Exactly, sweetheart. That understanding, it will carry you far in life. It's not easy, and it takes courage, but it's how we grow and protect ourselves without losing our hearts. As the days turned into weeks, our daughter began to reclaim parts of her life that had been overshadowed by the wedding disaster. She re-engaged with her hobbies, pursued opportunities she had been hesitant to explore, and re-established boundaries in her social circle. And through it all, I noticed a subtle but profound shift. She carried herself differently now. Her posture was more confident, her speech more measured, and her eyes, once clouded with fear or uncertainty, now held a quiet clarity. One morning, she asked me to accompany her to the local cafe, a place she had avoided for months after some of the wedding fallout had spilled into public gossip. As we walked through the door, she paused, taking a deep breath. "Mom, I'm nervous," she admitted. "What if people are still talking?" I smiled gently. "Honey, people will always have opinions. What matters is how you carry yourself. Walk in truth, with integrity, and let the rest fade into background noise." She nodded, taking my hand for reassurance. And as we walked to a table, I saw it. The quiet transformation that had been building over months. She was no longer defined by chaos, embarrassment, or exclusion. She was defined by resilience, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront reality with courage. Later that afternoon, she received a message from her father's side of the family expressing concern about lingering tensions with the groom's family. I watched as she read the message, then composed a calm, measured response. No panic, no anger, just clarity, boundaries, and honesty. And when she finished, she looked up at me with a smile that was almost shy. "Mom, I think I finally understand what it feels like to respond from strength rather than fear." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Honey, that's exactly it. Strength doesn't come from avoiding conflict or hiding from consequences. It comes from facing life honestly, making wise choices, and trusting yourself." As the weeks turned into months, our daughter continued to rebuild her life with quiet determination. She maintained boundaries with the groom, rebuilt trust with family members who had questioned her decisions, and learned to assert herself in situations where she might have once had faltered. And through it all, my husband and I remained constant, patient presences, available when guidance was needed, silent when space was required, and loving unconditionally through every step of the journey. It wasn't always easy. Some days old wounds resurfaced. She would sometimes glance at old photos, remember the wedding disaster, or recount moments of betrayal with lingering pain. But even in those moments, I noticed a difference. She no longer recoiled in fear. She processed the memories, acknowledged the emotions, and then set them aside, refusing to let the past dictate her present. That, more than anything, filled me with pride. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, our daughter looked at us with a quiet intensity. "Mom, Dad, I don't think I could have done any of this without you. Not the recovery, not the rebuilding, not the growth. I feel like I finally found my footing." I reached over, taking her hands in mine. "Honey, you've always had the strength inside you. We just helped you see it. Life will continue to challenge you, but now you have the tools to face it." She smiled, a small but genuine expression, and leaned her head against my shoulder. And in that simple, quiet moment, I realized something profound. The wedding, the exclusion, the chaos, and the betrayal had all been catalysts for growth, not just for her, but for all of us. We had witnessed resilience, learned patience, and deepened the bonds of family in ways that no celebration, gift, or event could ever achieve. From that day forward, the lessons of the wedding became part of our family's story, a story of honesty, courage, and the enduring strength of love. Our daughter carried them with her in every choice she made, every relationship she nurtured, and every challenge she faced. And through it all, my husband and I remained constant, patient presences, available when guidance was needed, silent when space was required, and loving unconditionally through every step of the journey. It wasn't always easy. Some days old wounds resurfaced. She would sometimes glance at old photos, remember the wedding disaster, or recount moments of betrayal with lingering pain. But even in those moments, I noticed a difference. She no longer recoiled in fear. She processed the memories, acknowledged the emotions, and then set them aside, refusing to let the past dictate her present. That, more than anything, filled me with pride. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, our daughter looked at us with a quiet intensity. "Mom, Dad, I don't think I could have done any of this without you. Not the recovery, not the rebuilding, not the growth. I feel like I finally found my footing." I reached over, taking her hands in mine. "Honey, you've always had the strength inside you. We just helped you see it. Life will continue to challenge you, but now you have the tools to face it." She smiled, a small but genuine expression, and leaned her head against my shoulder. And in that simple, quiet moment, I realized something profound. The wedding, the exclusion, the chaos, and the betrayal had all been catalysts for growth, not just for her, but for all of us. We had witnessed resilience, learned patience, and deepened the bonds of family in ways that no celebration, gift, or event could ever achieve. From that day forward, the lessons of the wedding became part of our family's story, a story of honesty, courage, and the enduring strength of love. Our daughter carried them with her in every choice she made, every relationship she nurtured, and every challenge she faced. And through it all, my husband and I remained constant, patient. Life had begun to settle into a rhythm I hadn't thought possible after the wedding chaos. The quiet moments at home, the laughter, the shared meals, even the mundane chores felt different now. They carried the weight of lessons learned, resilience earned, and relationships repaired. Our daughter had grown into a version of herself I scarcely recognized from those early days of panic and fear, confident, self-aware, and careful with whom she allowed into her life. But even as calm returned, I could sense an undercurrent of tension whenever the wedding was mentioned, whether directly or indirectly. Friends, relatives, and acquaintances still had opinions, sometimes misguided, sometimes harsh. I noticed our daughter bracing herself in subtle ways, her posture stiffening, her voice slightly clipped when someone dared to comment, and I realized that even though the immediate chaos was over, the emotional aftermath lingered, waiting to resurface in small, unexpected moments. One afternoon, she came to me with a worried expression, holding her phone like a lifeline. "Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. Someone at work knows about the wedding fiasco and they've been gossiping. I don't know what to do." I motioned for her to sit beside me and took her hands in mine. "Honey, you've already navigated far worse than this. Gossip is uncomfortable, yes, but it has no power over you unless you let it. Stand firm in your truth. Respond with honesty if necessary, but don't let it define how you carry yourself." Her eyes searched mine, and I could see both fear and determination in them. "But what if they think I'm weak or that I don't handle things well?" "Sweetheart," I said gently, "strength isn't defined by what others think of you. Strength is how you respond when life tests you. You've survived betrayal, chaos, exclusion, and deception. You've learned from it. That's real strength." She exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair, as if absorbing every word. "I guess I just don't want to go back to feeling powerless." "I won't," I assured her. "You've grown too much for that. You now have the knowledge, the courage, and the support to handle challenges without letting fear take control. Remember, honey, it's not the gossip or judgment that defines you, it's how you carry yourself through it." Over the next few weeks, she began asserting herself more in subtle ways, speaking up in meetings, setting boundaries with friends, and confronting uncomfortable situations without panic. And while there were moments of hesitation, she moved forward with a quiet determination that was almost palpable. Each small victory, each assertive step reinforced the lesson she had learned from the wedding chaos. One evening, as we were all sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us." I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us." Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. "I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them." "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "And remember, mistakes don't make you weak, they make you human. Growth comes from acknowledging them, understanding them, and moving forward wiser than before." Around that time, she began to take steps to rebuild her social circle carefully. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her during the wedding fiasco and distanced herself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. It was a deliberate process, one that required both courage and discernment, and I watched with pride as she navigated with increasing confidence. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us." I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us." Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. "I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them." "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "And remember, mistakes don't make you weak, they make you human. Growth comes from acknowledging them, understanding them, and moving forward wiser than before." Around that time, she began to take steps to rebuild her social circle carefully. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her during the wedding fiasco and distanced herself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. It was a deliberate process, one that required both courage and discernment, and I watched with pride as she navigated with increasing confidence. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us. I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us. Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them. Yes, I said, squeezing her hand. And remember, mistakes don't make you weak, they make you human. Growth comes from acknowledging them, understanding them, and moving forward wiser than before. Around that time, she began to take steps to rebuild her social circle carefully. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her during the wedding fiasco and distanced herself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. It was a deliberate process, one that required both courage and discernment, and I watched with pride as she navigated with increasing confidence. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us. I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us. Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them. Yes, I said, squeezing her hand. And remember, mistakes don't make you weak, they make you human. Growth comes from acknowledging them, understanding them, and moving forward wiser than before. Around that time, she began to take steps to rebuild her social circle carefully. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her during the wedding fiasco and distanced herself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. It was a deliberate process, one that required both courage and discernment, and I watched with pride as she navigated with increasing confidence. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us. I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us. Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning from them. Yes, I said, squeezing her hand. And remember, mistakes don't make you weak, they make you human. Growth comes from acknowledging them, understanding them, and moving forward wiser than before. Around that time, she began to take steps to rebuild her social circle carefully. She reconnected with friends who had stood by her during the wedding fiasco and distanced herself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. It was a deliberate process, one that required both courage and discernment, and I watched with pride as she navigated with increasing confidence. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. Mom, Dad, I think I understand now why life puts these challenges in our path, not to punish us, but to teach us, to show us our own strength and the value of those who truly support us. I smiled softly, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Exactly, sweetheart. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. They test us, shape us, and reveal truths about ourselves and the people around us. Her gaze met mine, steady and thoughtful. I feel like I finally know who I can trust, who really matters, and it's not about avoiding mistakes, it's By the time autumn rolled around, the air had grown crisp and clear, and with it came a sense of closure that I hadn't thought possible months ago. Our daughter had fully reclaimed her life, stepping into it with a confidence and clarity that was almost startling. She had learned to navigate conflict without fear, to set boundaries without guilt, and to value the people who truly mattered while letting go of those who didn't. The lessons of the wedding and its chaos were no longer raw wounds. They were guiding principles, quietly shaping her choices, her relationships, and her understanding of herself. One afternoon, she came to us, her eyes bright with purpose. "Mom, Dad, I've decided to start a small project, something I've been putting off because I was too afraid of failing or being judged. I want to create a space where people can share their stories, their mistakes, and what they've learned, kind of like a safe place to process life." I felt my chest tighten with pride. "That sounds wonderful, honey, and it's exactly the kind of courage and empathy you've developed over these past months. You're turning your experiences into something meaningful, not just for yourself, but for others." She smiled faintly. "I want people to know that mistakes don't define them, that chaos isn't the end, and that growth is always possible. I learned that the hard way, and I don't want anyone else to feel alone when life falls apart." Her words hit me with a profound clarity. The wedding disaster, which had once seemed like the darkest chapter of our lives, had become the catalyst for something far larger, a lesson in resilience, a blueprint for personal growth, and an understanding of the true value of family. What had once been chaos had turned into wisdom. Over the next few weeks, we helped her organize her project. She spoke with people quietly and empathetically, offering a listening ear and encouragement without judgment. I watched as she became a source of strength for others, drawing on her experiences, her mistakes, and the lessons she had learned from exclusion, betrayal, and the chaos of her wedding day. It was a transformation that left me both proud and humbled. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, she spoke in a tone that was calm yet earnest. "Mom, Dad, I think I finally understand what you meant about patience, not just with others, but with myself. I used to rush, panic, and fear every decision. Now I pause, reflect, and make choices from a place of awareness." I nodded, smiling softly. "Honey, that's exactly it. Life teaches us patience through adversity. Every mistake, every moment of chaos is an opportunity to grow if we approach it thoughtfully. And now you're doing exactly that." She leaned back, her gaze drifting to the window, where the fading light of sunset cast long shadows across the room. "It's funny," she said quietly, almost to herself, "how a day that felt like the end of everything became the beginning of understanding, of growth, of trust." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of those words. Yes, sweetheart, that's life. Sometimes the moments we think will break us are the ones that build us stronger than we ever imagined. As autumn deepened, our daughter continued to grow, both personally and emotionally. She repaired fractured relationships, built new connections, and became a source of support for those who face struggles of their own. And through it all, she maintained a grounded sense of self, informed by the lessons of her wedding, her mistakes, and the betrayals she had endured. It was during one particularly quiet evening, as we sat together sharing tea and reminiscing about past holidays, that she spoke in a reflective tone. "Mom, Dad, do you ever think about how different life would have been if the wedding had gone smoothly?" I smiled softly, a trace of sadness mingled with understanding in my heart. "Yes, I think about it sometimes, but then I realize nothing would have taught us the lessons we needed to learn. The chaos, the exclusion, the betrayal, it shaped you into the person you are today, and it reminded us of the strength of patience, love, and family bonds." She nodded slowly, processing my words. I guess I wouldn't trade the growth for the pain. I learned so much about myself, about trust, about resilience, and I learned that mistakes don't destroy you, they prepare you. Exactly. That was the moral we had hoped she would grasp, not just for her wedding, but for life itself. Growth, resilience, and clarity do not come from smooth paths. They come from facing challenges, making mistakes, and navigating the chaos with integrity and support. Over the following weeks, I noticed a subtle but profound change in her approach to life. She was more measured in her interactions, more compassionate towards herself and others, and more grounded in her understanding of boundaries. Even when new challenges arose, a conflict at work, a misunderstanding with a friend, she approached them calmly, thoughtfully, and with a clarity that had been absent during the early days after the wedding. One afternoon, she invited her close friends over for a small gathering. There were no grand decorations, no rigid schedule, just genuine connection and laughter. I watched from the kitchen as she moved among them, confident, at ease, and unafraid. It struck me then that the wedding disaster, which had once overshadowed every part of her life, had become a stepping stone. She was now capable of creating meaningful, authentic experiences without fear of chaos or judgment. Later that evening, as we all sat together enjoying dessert, she turned to us with a thoughtful expression. Mom, Dad, I think I finally understand what family really is. It's not about being included in every moment or celebrating every event perfectly. It's about being present, offering support, and loving unconditionally, even when life goes wrong. I felt a lump in my throat, a mixture of pride and relief swelling in my chest. Yes, honey, that's exactly it. Life will challenge you. People may disappoint or exclude you, and chaos will find its way into your life. But love, patience, and presence turn heartbreak into growth and betrayal into understanding. She smiled faintly, a mixture of contentment and reflection in her eyes. I feel like I finally come full circle. I faced chaos, mistakes, and betrayal, and I've learned to navigate life with my eyes open, my heart strong, and my trust in those who matter wisely placed. And in that moment, I knew the journey we had all endured, the heartbreak, the exclusion, the emotional fallout, had led to something far greater than any wedding celebration ever could. It had forged resilience, taught patience, and revealed the enduring power of family bonds. As the night drew on, I sat quietly, reflecting on the months that had passed. The wedding was a disaster, yes, but it had been the catalyst for transformation, growth, and understanding. And as I watched our daughter laugh and converse with friends, grounded and confident, I realized that we had all emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. The chaos that had once threatened our family had in the end strengthened it. And in that quiet understanding, I found a deep, abiding peace, a sense of hope and clarity that no wedding disaster, betrayal, or exclusion could ever take away. By the time winter arrived, our lives had shifted into a new, steadier rhythm. The chaos of the wedding, the exclusion, and the betrayal that had once consumed every thought now felt like a distant storm, one we had survived together. Our daughter, once fearful and hesitant, now carried herself with a quiet confidence that radiated in everything she did. And as I watched her navigate life with clarity and strength, I realized that the true story of that wedding wasn't one of disaster. It was a story of transformation, resilience, and enduring family bonds. One snowy evening, she came into the living room, her cheeks flushed from the cold, carrying a small notebook. She sat down beside me and opened it. Mom, Dad, I've been writing, not just about the wedding, but everything I've learned since. Every mistake, every betrayal, every moment of chaos, it's all here. I want to remember so I never forget what this experience taught me. I reached over, taking her hand in mine. Honey, that's beautiful. Reflection is one of the most powerful ways to grow. You're turning pain into wisdom and wisdom into strength. She nodded, eyes shining. I finally see now that mistakes don't define us, they teach us. Chaos doesn't destroy us, it shows us what we're capable of. And love, real love, like yours, can withstand even the worst storms. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Sweetheart, we've always been here. That's what family does. We don't shield you from consequences, but we don't abandon you either. We walk beside you through everything, ready to support and love without condition. In that moment, I realized that the wedding, which had once felt like the end of the world, had actually been a beginning, a turning point that revealed truths about trust, resilience, and the strength of family bonds. Over the next few weeks, our daughter continued to grow, embracing opportunities she had once shied away from. She approached her relationships with discernment, spoke her truth with confidence, and navigated challenges with patience and clarity. And through it all, she carried the lessons of the wedding like a compass, reminders of what mattered, what didn't, and how to face life with courage. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she turned to us with a thoughtful expression. Mom, Dad, I think I finally understand why you always stayed calm even when I pushed you away or made mistakes. It wasn't just patience, it was faith. Faith that I could find my way even if I stumbled. Faith that I would learn from the chaos and grow stronger. I reached over, squeezing her hand gently. Yes, honey, that's exactly it. Faith in you and in the bond we share. Life will challenge you. People may disappoint you and chaos will inevitably enter your world, but you have the tools to navigate it and the love to anchor you. She leaned back, smiling softly. I've learned so much about myself, about others, and about what really matters. I've learned that love isn't about perfect moments or flawless events. It's about being present, offering support, and standing by those who matter through everything. My husband and I exchanged a quiet glance, both of us feeling the weight of that statement. The wedding had been a disaster, yes, but it had revealed something far deeper than surface-level celebrations. It had revealed resilience, patience, the power of truth, and the enduring strength of family bonds. In the following days, we noticed the subtle but profound ways our daughter's transformation manifested. She became a source of guidance and empathy for friends, offering perspective without judgment. She faced challenges at work and in her social circle with calm assertiveness, and she no longer allowed the mistakes of the past to dictate her present or her future. The lessons of exclusion, betrayal, and chaos had been internalized. They had become part of her moral compass. One snowy afternoon, she came to us with a small smile. Mom, Dad, I think I finally understand what it means to forgive. Not just others, but myself. I can see the mistakes I made, the choices I regret, but I can also see how far I've come, and that makes all the difference. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Honey, forgiveness isn't easy. It's a process, but you've already demonstrated the courage and insight to embrace it, both for yourself and for others. That's one of the greatest gifts life can teach us. She nodded, her eyes reflecting both reflection and relief. I feel like I can finally move forward, not running from the past, but carrying its lessons with me. And I know that no matter what happens, I have a foundation of love and support I can always rely on. That night, as snow fell softly outside, I watched her sit by the window, journal in hand, writing quietly. I realized that the chaos of her wedding, which had once filled us with despair, had ultimately gifted her something far greater than any celebration or ceremony could have: insight, resilience, and a profound understanding of family, love, and personal growth. The moral of the entire ordeal was clear. Life will test us. People we love may exclude or betray us, and chaos will inevitably find its way into our lives. But patience, unwavering presence, and unconditional love turn heartbreak into wisdom, betrayal into clarity, and exclusion into lessons that last a lifetime. And that truth, proven through months of turmoil and transformation, was a gift far greater than we could have imagined. Weeks later, we sat together in the living room, enjoying the quiet comfort of our home. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered softly, "Mom, Dad, thank you for never giving up on me, for letting me stumble, and for being here through everything. I finally understand what family really is." I hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of love that had weathered storms, chaos, and heartbreak. Honey, that's what family is. Not perfect moments, not flawless events, but presence, patience, and love through mistakes, through chaos, and through life itself. And in that moment, I realized that we all had grown, not just our daughter, but all of us. We had learned that love isn't measured by attendance at weddings or the absence of mistakes. It's measured by endurance, by faith in one another, and by the courage to face life's storms together. As the snow continued to fall outside, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible months ago. The wedding may have ended in chaos, but it had sparked transformation, growth, and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. Our daughter had emerged stronger, wiser, and more grounded than ever. And for my husband and I, witnessing that transformation and being a part of it was more meaningful than any celebration, gift, or ceremony could ever be. The story of that wedding, with all its pain and heartbreak, had become a story of resilience, love, and the enduring strength of family bonds. And in the quiet reflection of that snowy evening, I understood fully. Life will test us. People we love may exclude or betray us, and chaos will inevitably arrive uninvited. But patience, unwavering presence, and unconditional love turn heartbreak into wisdom, betrayal into clarity, and exclusion into lessons that last a lifetime.